accountable. You mentioned the word congressional district in Washington, and people get very nervous. And the reason is because they can be held accountable. There is no other organization that really breaks information down to the congressional district level. And that's what we're trying to do, give people a sense of the kinds of choices that are being made, and to give people a vision of what else we could do with that money if we didn't spend it on either wasteful or destructive ways of spending. So we could deal with some of the major needs that we've got in this country. We could repair our schools. We could provide health care for people. We could rebuild the bridges that need to be rebuilt, and a quarter of the bridges in this country need to be substantially repaired or rebuilt. But people need to see how much money is being spent in their congressional district, how much money is going to things like weaponry and more, and really begin to talk about changing our priorities. You know, we spend an enormous amount of money on the military. We spend as much as the rest of the world combined. That's an enormous amount of money, and we're becoming the world's global cop, and I think there's a real danger in that. And so we are really hoping that people can begin to understand the implications of going in that direction, and begin to reconsider other alternatives.
Greg Speeter, one last question before we have to go. That money seems to have been handed out disproportionately to supporters of the Bush administration, people that were in favor of a Bush presidency back in the contested 2000 election. They seem to have lined up behind the Republicans. Do you believe that's because they're the party in power, because they're more pro-business, and certainly war is good business? Or do you believe that there's another reason that this has become more of a Republican issue, despite the fact the Democrats are not opposing it?
Well, I think ultimately, you know, whoever's in power is going to try to make changes, and the only way to really address that and to keep the scales from tipping over is to really have the numbers for their congressional district, and to know how much is being spent in their congressional district, and for citizens to be able to hold their elected officials accountable. And we're hoping that people can use our information.
Can this be correlated back to some of the handouts and some of the earmarks to defense contractors in those districts? Can there be a correlation set up? If you happen to be, you know, in a district where General Electric has a military operation that they're providing services for the military, can you see that the money's going back into your district? Is there a way to set up such a correlation?
We haven't looked at that specifically, but I will say that most weapon systems are designed so that there is employment opportunities in as many congressional districts as possible. It's a way that defense contractors have of trying to addict the member of Congress to their weapon system and to military spending. And that's been done for years. I've been in congressional offices where congressional aides have shown me a map of a certain defense contractor and how many jobs go to which congressional district. But what we forget in that is every time you spend $1 billion in one area, you're not spending it in another area. So I would really encourage people involved in housing and healthcare and education to take a look at, if we spend more in the Pentagon, how many jobs are being lost elsewhere. And in fact, studies have shown historically that if you spend $1 billion on military procurement, you get fewer jobs than you do in either education or job training or healthcare or some of the other human needs areas.
Greg Speeter, the National Priorities Project, thank you so much for joining us on the INN World Report.
Thank you very much.
Are people going to